From the studios of WGTD HD on the Kenosha campus of Gateway Technical College, this is Speaking of Our Words, a program produced by the Kenosha Area Writers Guild and WGTD. As part of the mission statement of the Kenosha Writers Guild, it is their intent to bring together serious writers and those who write for pleasure to celebrate their stories and to reflect the wide range of styles, voices, and content. The Guild embraces not only prose writing, but poetry, plays, and screenwriting. And now, today's program.
Hello there, and welcome to Speaking of Our Words, radio programming that brings you the wide range of voices, stories, and forms of local writers, and offering you some insight into their creative process. My name is DeGuire. I teach creative writing workshops at Columbia College, Chicago, and I will be your host. We have several guests in the studio today to read from their work. But first off, we have our featured guest, Mr. Tony Bowers. Hello, Tony. How you doing?
I'm great. Thank you, Chris, for having me on.
Yeah. You're welcome. We go way back, Tony and me, back to your graduate student days at Columbia College, Chicago. I remember when you were in the tutor training class many years ago.
Yeah, that was awesome because it really it laid the groundwork for not just my writing, but also my teaching as well. So it was a very productive time.
Yeah. Well, I remember those days. So you have a book out there, I hear, Tony.
Yeah. It's called On the Nine, and the publisher just gave me the date. We're looking at September the 14th, so it's coming up really fast.
Yeah, that date's going to be here before you know it. So, well, tell us a little bit about the book, 'cause I haven't had a chance to peruse it yet. I know you were going to be sending me, or your publisher was going to be sending me a copy, and I haven't been able to take a look at it yet. But tell us a little bit about what the book is about, Tony.
Okay, sure. It's a collection of 12 short stories, and it's set in a neighborhood in Chicago on the South Side. It's called the Grand Crossing neighborhood. It's located near 79th and Cottage Grove. So it's on the deep South Side. Now, each of the stories it takes place in this neighborhood, but it jumps through time from the late 70s all the way up until present day. And each story is told through the vantage point of a male protagonist, a black male. So I really wanted to, just look through the eyes of black men growing up on the South Side of Chicago, with everything that's happening right now in our country. I wanted to just give a different view, a different perspective of the black man growing up in the urban city, dealing with all sorts of pressures and strife and stress. But at the same time, as all of these things are happening to all 12 of these characters, there is a nobility, a dignity that shines through. So that's really sort of a high-level, breakdown of what each of the stories is about. So I'm really excited about it. These stories really popped up in those Columbia years. So I've been working on these for about almost 7 years now. Mm-hmm. And just really got it to the point where I felt really proud, and somebody wanted to take a chance and put these out there. So I'm excited about it.
Oh, good. So it's a collection of stories, but this is not a novel in stories. These are 12 different stories, correct?
Yeah, now see, that's interesting. I would not classify it as a novel in stories, but here's the thing. There are 12 separate stories, but it's all about the same locale, and a lot of the characters cross over into other stories. So, for example, it's sort of this idea of we have this shared space Even time may be really fluid. So there's one particular character. His name is Bo Peep, and he's like the neighborhood hustle man. He's very wise, and he's the guy you will go to if you need anything. He actually appears in 3 of the stories throughout 3 different times. From I think he first appears in the 80s, and then the 90s, and then one of the stories that takes place during current day. But I want to think about these as 12 separate stories and not necessarily a novel in stories. It's sort of fluid, but at the same time, I see them all individually.
So each one of them can stand on their own. Oh, that's very interesting. That's very good, Tony.
Yeah.
Some other things I'm curious about is because you mentioned that some of these stories you generated back in the day at school. Can you talk a little bit about your process, about how you were able to put these together? Did you envision any of these stories as perhaps longer works, and did you realize that I got a collection of short stories here? How did the sort of process develop as these stories started to come together for you?
One of the things that I learned at Columbia was that the process should be fluid. So I just jumped in and started writing. I didn't necessarily see the end and say, I'm working on these stories, and eventually one day I'm going to take them all and put them together. Just in there doing the work, working on the stories. Some of these stories have been published and before in publications through Columbia College, like the Hair Trigger. There's a story from Hair Trigger, one of our great anthologies, and also the Story Week Reader published 2 of those stories as well. So these were just always going to be one-offs. It was me doing work. Some of it was practice, if you will, playing with voice, playing with pace, playing with characterization, refining it, and actually having it turn into something. So I just saw myself doing the work, making lots of revisions, and then it was only about maybe a year and a half ago that I said, you know what, if I take all of these stories, because I'm writing about the same locale, I'm writing about the same overarching thing, which is hope against strife, hope against hopelessness, dignity in the midst of harsh circumstances through the eyes of a male, black male protagonist. So this could be a collection. I discovered that I think it was like maybe 3 o'clock in the morning or something like that. So
that's when all great discoveries are made.
Yeah, that late, or that early, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, it was just really a process of just getting in there, doing the work, and making the stories as tight as they could be, whether they got submitted or not.
Any specifics that you can talk about with your revision process as you try to structure these stories, put them together in the order that they're in?
I really learned the power of revision. Again, Columbia is like the wellspring for everything that I do, and I give all the credit to that institution, to the instructors and the professors there. It was Joe Sombrello that really taught me about the power of revision and just parsing through the words, making sure that this word, that one word, is that the most impactful word that you can use. And I would say my revision process is very audience centered. What do they need? What's going to help them connect to this story, to these characters? What's going to move them? And so as I'm going through it, I'm not thinking about it necessarily from my own perspective, but I'm always asking myself, well, how can I be more visual here? How can I be more impactful here? And just really going through it as tightly as I can. I still need editing from someone else after that. But through that revision process, always asking myself, how can I serve the reader? So that's really the crux of it. And I got that, again, from Columbia.
So on this sort of audience awareness vibe that you're talking about, can you talk a little bit about how your tutoring experience and how your teaching experience now perhaps helps you with your writing as far as maybe terms of audience or anything else that the tutoring and teaching seems to be helping you with?
Well, it's one of those situations where I think I may have like, let's see, I have 4 classes, and I think I'll have like over 100 students. And each one of them, they are their own individual, and they have their own different needs, and I have to make sure that on some level, I differentiate my instruction. What does this particular student need? So I'm really, really focused in on, I guess you can call it service. How can I serve you? That's why I'm here, to bring some information, some education, some content to you that's going to enrich you, that's going to illuminate. And if you're not getting it in this particular way, then, what do I need to do in order to make sure that you get everything that you need from this content, this knowledge, this information? So that right there is all about the teaching, but you can link that. I link that over to the writing as well, because although I, have to picture this universal audience, I see them, they're who they are in a grand sense, and I'm always asking myself that question. Again, how can I serve you with these words? In the first few drafts, it's about me. It's about me getting the words down. Ooh, I like that. I love that. Ooh, that feels so good. But when it comes to like some of the deeper drafts, draft number 5, draft number 7, it's putting again the audience up there, because the audience and my students there, I look at them as the same, and it's all about what do they need. What do they really need? So the two really feed in on each other.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about any research that you did for this book too? I like this idea that all these stories seem to take place in the same universe, as it were. But what type of research did you have to do for any of these stories, Tony, or anything, any stories you'd like to share with us about how you went about researching?
Well, for my own research, I grew up in this neighborhood. It's where these were my stomping grounds from age 7 until about maybe 18. So a lot of this was lived experience, in a sense. The other research I did was actually like interviewing like my mother and my father, some of my friends who still lived in the neighborhood, or lived in the neighborhood when I was growing up. Just talking to them, not really in an interview style, but just sharing stories. Remember that time when, so we're sharing these stories, and my father is just like, he's the master storyteller, this guy. So he would just give me all these wonderful, rich and colorful stories. And so being a writer, what I do is I take those real live stories and I fictionalize them, I chop them up, I add things, I put a character here or there, so on and so forth. In addition to these, like the story swapping, we can call it, with swapping stories back and forth. Getting onto the computer, getting into the internet, and finding out what's happening in the community right now, because the community itself, the real life community, and for the last 6 or 7 years, it's really been going through some distress. Like in 2013, it was responsible for like 70% of the violent gun shootings in the city, in the whole city. Chicago's a pretty big place. So this neighborhood was like the OK Corral, if you will. So just reading some news stories, reading some archives on some of those different things that were happening in the neighborhood, and then just really helping. That helped me to sort of get into this place and add even more onto it. So bringing together my own lived stories and the stories of the community through archives and through old news stories. So
this idea of taking real life experiences, or whether it happened to you or people or just in the neighborhood, and embellishing, exaggerating, and just finding out where the story is that you wanted to tell. Correct?
Absolutely. There was one particular story, if I could share this with you. So as I'm going through some of the archives and the old news stories from like the Sun Times, I think it was. There was a story that happened in 2011, And so I'm writing this particular story. It's called One Blood. It's in the collection. I was writing this in like 2014. 2014 is one of the last stories I wrote. As I'm digging through the archives, just looking at past issues of the Sun-Times, I come upon this story where a young man, he was a known gangbanger, and he got caught up in a drive-by, I think it was. And at this particular time, it's early in the morning, and he was holding his baby daughter, his infant child, in the front seat, passenger in the driver's side seat of the car. The shooter either didn't see the child or didn't care, fired into the car, and the baby ultimately ended up being safe, but the father, he got hit in the shoulder. So everybody lived. That story really touched me. It really moved me. So I said, what was he thinking? What was this guy thinking, this father? Forget about the labels of gangbanger, criminal. Forget about that. This is a father holding his child, and their bullets penetrating into the car, and his child's life is right there. I just saw him almost like it was frozen, and I'm imagining what his thoughts are, imagining what he's feeling, and thinking about what happened before, what happened after. And so that's where the story really started to percolate, if you will. And so that's where the imagination meets the real life. The imagination mingles with the research, if you will. So that's really kind of my process.
Oh, that's a great story, Tony. And I think what that adds to is this idea of the importance of being a good listener as a writer, where you're listening to not only just the stories that are being told to you, but listening to the stories that are happening around you and finding out where they're at.
That's really key and important what you just said, because I think that every writer in their toolbox should have a keen sense of observation in there. To see and to take in life, to observe, and to be curious. It's just like I'm looking at people on the train. I'm looking at people on the bus stop. I'm overhearing conversations, which is an exercise at Columbia, by the way, an overheard conversation, right?
Yep.
And then wondering, what's the story around this thing that I'm seeing on the bus stop, on the train, this conversation that I'm hearing. And so having these observation skills is really, really key, because, what we do as literary artists, right? As literary artists, we take real life. We bring it to the page, we imagine it. It's not real life, but it's a facsimile of life. It's our version of it. We reimagine it, we put it on the page, and then we share that with an audience who can then, if we've done our job, can see it, hear it, smell it as well. They can feel it as well. So that observation is really, really key. Being able to look out into the world and then being curious about it, asking yourself questions, that's really the fun part, before I even get down and really start committing to the pounding the keys of writing notes, post-it notes in your journal, asking myself and yourself those questions. What is that about? What's happening? What's really going on here? So it's fun. That's the fun part.
Yeah, and these stories can come from anywhere. So the book is On the 9, and it comes out September 14th, you say, Tony?
Yeah, that's right.
All right, very good. So, Tony, we'd love to have you come into the studio at some point and read from it. Maybe next month or a couple months down the road. That would really be great.
I would love to do that. I'd love to drive on up and crack open the book and give a great reading for you and the audience.
Excellent. Well, we will keep in touch so we can get you up here, all right?
All right. Thanks so much, man.
All right, Tony Bowers, thank you very much. You are listening to Speaking of Our Words. All right, and our first reader in studio today is going to be Irene Bilak. Hello, Irene.
Hello, Chris. How are you?
Good, real good, thank you. What do you have for us today?
Well, I had a hard time deciding. I was going to read one of my pieces that I had published, which was nonfiction that I had read, that I had written about 3 years ago, and it's published in this booklet. And I told you, I think, when we talked last, that I thought it really represented my voice. But then I decided against it, and I'm reading part of my novel in which I incorporated a little bit of the nonfiction into the novel.
Oh, all right. Well, very good.
So this is what I'm going to do. This is a chapter about one of the main characters, and his name is Ted.
All right, very good. Irene Bilak, take it away.
He could not live it down. How could he and Xenia have left Nadia in Hungary? How could they? What went through his mind that he succumbed to the Rosani and their plea to help them? Ted was older than his wife by 5 years. He should have been wiser. He should not have left his little girl. War was imminent everywhere in Europe. He should have known that they might not be able to come back. Ah, hindsight. He knew he was beating himself up, but he couldn't help it. Xenia immersed herself in charity work and helped him with his business. Ted, of course, did nothing but business. He liked being successful. The success felt as good as any achievement would. But he was not happy. He was not happy because his little girl was missing, and all the money in the world would not bring her back. No one could find her, as hard as everyone tried. The Iron Curtain was not a piece of cloth. It was a psychological obstacle, and it seemed to be made of real iron. It was impenetrable. Every avenue was close to them as hard as they tried to break it. Perhaps someday, if she was still alive. Oh God, how he wanted to find her. Teddy, I will be speaking to a women's group. The Chicago Ukrainian National Women's League of America has invited me to speak at their 20th anniversary. I will be leaving for Chicago next month, Xenia informed her husband excitedly. Oh, that's great. I'm sure you'll do a fine job. Ted tried not to show his irritation. He knew that Xenia did the best she could, throwing herself into charities and worthwhile causes to forget her sorrow over losing Nadia. Not a day went by, as busy as they both were, without their mentioning their daughter. Where was she? What was she doing? Was she alive? Sometimes they argued, other times cried, hoping their sons would not see them. The boys helped them ease their sorrow. They did well in school, went on with their life professionally, married. Soon there would be grandchildren. Ted loved his sons immeasurably and showered with them both with all the attention that he could and time allowed. He also involved them in his business ventures as soon as he was able. Yuri was eager to help Tato. After school he was at the store. In college he studied economics and business courses. Ted was happy and Yuri was a great help, taking over many of the important ventures. Greg helped when he was in high school. Mom, Tato, I want to study law and foreign affairs, and if I get into Yale, I'll make you proud, Greg informed his parents. Of course, Ted and Xenia were proud that Greg was making this choice. Neither son replaced Nadia in their parents' heart, but they loved them as intensely as ever and wanted both of them to succeed in life. Along the way, from Ukraine to Austria, through the bombing and all their problems, the strong family of 4 joined forces and helped each other. When on the way from Hungary, both boys strayed from the train for a few minutes while Xenia was trying to cook potatoes over an open fire, Ted remembered a strange event. Yuri and Greg had gone too far to find more wood and sticks. Suddenly the whistle sounded and the refugees had to put out their fires and climb on board. Greg, Yuri, quick, run! We have to leave, cried Ted to his boys. The boys ran, barely making it. Every time Ted remembered, shivers like ants ran up and down his spine, thinking how they could have lost them both. Sometimes he had nightmares, remembering and seeing the train chugging along, the smoke billowing, his sons screaming and running. Another time, already in Austria, Greg and Yuri, along with their father, decided to explore the countryside during one of their stops along the route. A woman who must have been a local resident was just ahead of them. She picked up something off the ground which must have looked very innocent and interesting to her. "Oh, my God, she's picked up live ammunition," cried Ted, and the three of them ran back toward the train. The poor woman was torn to smithereens. This memory was deadly. He knew the boys did not forget the terrible incident because they talked about it long after. Ted could not forget either. The picture of the woman torn to bits was terrifying. She never had a chance. That was also the end of their wanderings away from the train. Xenia received the news and immediately said a prayer. She was horrified and hugged all three of her men. The memory of this horrific event stayed with all of them for many years. "Teddy, will you listen to the conclusion of my speech? I want to do a good job. I want to end it well. These ladies in Chicago have been working like busy bees. They started out as a small group of 10 women who had a lot in common as Ukrainian refugees in the United States, learned English, became American citizens, went to school, but they did not forget their heritage, just like the women here in Detroit. They learned about their culture, they have developed a lovely preschool, and to this day still organize many charitable cultural events. I'm very pleased that they asked me to speak to them in honor of their anniversary," pleaded Xenia, almost out of breath. "Go ahead, Xenia, I'll listen." Ted tried not to act bored or impatient. He wanted to be kind to his overactive wife. "At the end, you'll have to do the same for me, as I have something interesting to tell you also." After this comment, Teddy poured himself a drink. Later, another. Xenia proceeded, showing Ted several pages of her writing. She explained the essence of her speech. True to her word, she read only the conclusion. "In conclusion, your members showed their courage and intelligence by fostering the Ukrainian language, culture, history, and were able to pass on to their children and grandchildren what your parents could not have done in our besieged Ukraine. With the help of God, our founders and your present membership have never wavered from your main goal and principles. You continue to work for the benefit of our community of Ukrainians here and the good of your families. This makes all of us good citizens of the United States and the world. You also continue to work for the good of Ukrainians in Ukraine by calling on the legislators of the United States to foster democracy in Ukraine. Let us hope that Ukraine will try to break away from the clutches of the Soviet Union as soon as it is possible. There is much talk of dissident movement in Ukraine and elsewhere in Eastern Europe. If at all possible, let us interest our children in good scholarship and participation in American politics. Let us all keep strong and continue to exhibit the invincible spirit by carrying on a devotion to democratic principles and human rights. In so doing, we honor those who came before us and those who so valiantly died for the cause of freedom. You have carried on bravely for the women your branch was named, the 500 heroines of King Gear." Tad had to admit that Xenia wrote well. "Well done, Xenia. I like the fact that you are emphasizing our young people participating in all things political. I, of course, mean voting, human rights legislature, and running for office to bring equality for all Americans and Americans of Ukrainian descent. I'm all for our people learning English as soon as possible and becoming American citizens." "Oh, I'm glad you like it. I have some of these ideas in the body of my speech. Thanks for your comments. Now, what was it you wanted to tell me?" "Do you remember my business partner? I ran into him yesterday. He had a very unusual experience. He shared it with me and asked my advice, so I listened. It seems his father, who's a good doctor, is also the president of Ukrainian Doctors Association in California. He got a visit from a gentleman from Milwaukee who told him that he better send some money to his destitute children in Ukraine. My partner is the son of a second marriage of the doctor and knew nothing of the first family that his father had back in Ukraine. My heavens, that seems very serious." Xenia was moved by the story and knew of several families who had been separated during the war. Nothing was heard from spouses or family members because of the silence the Soviet Union perpetuated. Years passed and nature took over. Legally, people were free to marry, but morally, there was an obligation, especially when amnesty was announced and people came back from Siberia, Kazakhstan, or any other Gulag imprisonment or any of the Gulag prisons. There were those, of course, who shirked their duty, kept silent, and did nothing to help. They had made a new life for themselves and were weak individuals, selfish, living for the present, forgetting their obligations. How did the children find out about their half-brother from this man in Milwaukee? The gentleman from Milwaukee is a distant cousin who sent packages to his family in Komarno. The family wrote that the doctor's wife and children had been amnestied and needed help. Who, if not the husband, should be made accountable? I'm helping my family in Ukraine. It is time for the doctor who is making good money in private practice to send some help to his former wife and his children, no matter what, the Milwaukeean demanded. It is his obligation to help his former family, not mine. Fair is fair. Suffice it to say, our friend's father was embarrassed. He quickly sent money and letters to his former wife and his children who had come back from imprisonment. Right now, that is all he can do. Perhaps later some reconciliation can be made. I certainly hope so, said Zenya. I'm sure it will be difficult to support two families. There are many who made choices to go on with their life thinking the Soviet Union would last forever, thinking they'd never see their loved ones again. Some died in prison, of course. That is the sad part. The prisoners were beaten mercilessly and starved. All of this is coming out in the news little by little. I'm reading Solzhenitsyn's book now. What a rude awakening. How terribly people suffered. And for what? Zenya sat down to calm herself. I know, dear, replied Ted, more patient now, as he wanted his wife to know that he was contributing to good causes also. The émigré press here and in Canada has also written a great deal about the unjust arrests, humiliation, and torments in the Soviet Union. Next week there'll be a memorial service and discussion about the uprising in Kenosha, Kazakhstan, where so many people, especially women, perished under Soviet tanks. It is interesting that the branch of women to which you will be speaking is named after the Kenosha uprising. Archbishop Innocent will be delivering the homily. I have donated a large sum of money to underwrite the program, as there will be speakers from Canada, Philadelphia, and New York. It costs money to bring these speakers here for a serious discussion. Yes, thanks for doing all this. Our branch here in Detroit will be participating in the memorial and discussion. We'll be holding the American and Ukrainian flags, and our president will be the MC for the discussion. Zenya grew thoughtful as she laid her head on her husband's strong shoulder. If we could only find Nadia. Perhaps she's in Kazakhstan. If she's relieved, we'll find her. If she's released, we'll find her, added Ted, embracing his wife. He needed another drink.
All right, Irene Bilak, thank you very much. You are listening to Speaking of Our Words. All right, and next up is going to be Jeff Sturycz. Hello, Jeff.
Hey, Chris.
Jeff, what do you have for us today?
I am actually going to read two of my children's stories and a blog entry into the beginning of a website for the second story I'm going to read today.
All right, very good. Jeff Sturycz, take it away.
All right, the first story is called Melissa's Moon, and I wrote it quite a while ago for my daughter. And I will begin. Just in time for a summer's breeze, with whistles and songs and dancing trees, clouds for curtains and hoots and howls, Melissa's moon peeks and follows. She looks around through the tops of her eyes. Melissa's moon now ducks and hides. Where's my moon? She'd say in wonder. He pushes a cloud and says, Here I'm under. They'd laugh and play and giggle and such, and talk for hours about school and much. The moon told her stories about a long time ago, about a princess and fairies in a room with a glow. Tell me more, she said, with a beam and a smile. There were pictures and drawings and toys in a pile. Who was the girl? Did you know her well? Were your conversations long? Did she stay a spell? The girl was you from another time, when wishes and prayers came up to be mine. When you were little, you said in a prayer, you wished for the moon, and then up you stared. Now the room was quiet, a child in her bed, a room with a glow and a pillow for her head. Simple sounds that carried sweetly, an angel's face right there to greet me. Through the stars she lay there dreaming, dreaming freely. Melissa's moon is shining, shining freely. Melissa's moon. The second story I'm going to read is called At God's Feet. It's a story about the questions that are asked from a child to a parent after a pet has passed, and in this story it's a dog. At God's Feet. Mama, yes, baby. Is Lulabelle in the clouds? Yes, baby. She didn't like living here anymore? No, that's not why. Do you remember when Mama explained to you that Lulabelle had a sick belly? Yes'm. Mama? Yes, baby. Why did Lulabelle have to go into the clouds? Because that's where God lives, baby. Mama? Yes, baby. I'm confused. Well, baby, God took care of her sick belly. He did? Yes, he did, and he loves her just as much as we do. Mama? Yes, baby. Is Lulabelle coming back one day? No, baby. She's resting at God's feet. Mama? Yes, baby. Will God give Lulu treats and rubber belly? Yes, baby. A whole bunch of treats and plenty of belly rubs. Mama? Yes, baby. Can Lulu have visitors like us? No, baby, but she has lots of visitors already. She remembers us. Oh. Mama? Yes, baby. Will God give Lulabelle all my sugar kisses? Yes, baby. You'll feel them in your heart. I will? Yes, you will. Mama, how's God going to walk her? She forgot her leash. Lulu will come when God calls her. Oh, okay. Mama, yes, baby. Where's Lulu going to drink from? She forgot her drinking dish. God will quench her thirst when she is thirsty. Oh, okay. Mama, yes, baby. Lulu forgot her toys. How's she going to play without her toys? God will play with it, baby. Don't worry. Really? I'm glad. Mama? Yes, baby. Where's Lulabelle going to sleep? She doesn't have her bed. Remember, baby. She's resting at God's feet. Oh, I forgot. Don't worry, baby. You won't forget. That is At God's Feet. On my website, I am going to have a blog where people can leave their fondest memory of their lost friend and family member. And I have wrote something for my dog Champ, who I had to put down of old age. And this is called My Old Friend Needs Help Getting Home. I walk with you to the corner. Your tired body makes the walk carefully. You take the turn at the corner to go back. 2 steps, and then you sit. You look up at me even though the sun hurt your eyes. I knelt down in prayer and in friendship, and I whisper to you softly, you're such a good pup. You've given our whole family your gift of love. You are heavy, but my heart is heavy as well today. I kiss you on the head. I place my arms around you, and I lift you, much as you have lifted me in many other ways. My tears scroll down my face. My thoughts escape back to the day I first held you. You new to the earth and anxious. A car slows and asks if I need help, and I say, no, thank you. They ask yet another question. Is there anything wrong? And I say, no. My old friend needs help getting home.
Jeff Sturycz, thank you very much. Those are beautiful. You are listening to Speaking of Our Words. And next up is going to be Dave Gourdoux. Hello, Dave.
Hey, Bruce.
Dave, what do you have for us today?
I'll start with a brief disclaimer. I'm not a poet. I've written 2 pieces that aspire to be poetry. But what they actually are, I don't know. So.
All right, well, Dave Gourdoux, take it away.
Okay, the first is called Destination. So here goes. Destination. When I die, take my body to the river and drop me in. There is no death in the river. The river just goes on, and in its shallow depths I will go on too. In the cold and dark water, the current moving, steady and swift, and will lift my lifeless body and restart my silent and still heart. And there on the river bottom, amidst the rocks and weeds, I will be reanimated, reborn, and I will live under the surface, undetected and unknown by the life on the banks, carried on the current with the rest of the random debris that has been gathered up by her on her silent journey, until we, myself and the other dead debris, reach the ocean, the place where even the greatest rivers end up and end at. Each of their heartbeats cast into the endless dark depths until they, the currents, the heartbeats of all the rivers in the world, join together into the great giant heartbeat of the ocean. And I, like all the other debris brought to life by the river, will also be absorbed, small and insignificant, against the immense and unknown wilderness of the great sea. And then I will be no more, my destination reached, my purpose to become the tiniest fragment of the enormous and unending pulsating muscle that gives life to the vast and deep waters, to be a drop of water in the random tides turned by the pale white moon, finally fulfilled. Okay, this one is called You Were Sky. Excuse me. You were sky of the bright summer days. You radiated warmth even as your breeze blew cool. I was sea, dancing with you to the lapping rhythm of my surface, reflecting your deep blue, blurred in my uneasy and unsteady waters. We started a conversation, your breeze and my waves, and the sun grew jealous, and setting gave way to the cloud-filled night, and you were gone, leaving only black and endless emptiness, and the memories of your bright warmth on my sleeping and dreaming waves, and the sound of seabirds sparkling as they fly in your blue. On the dark sand of an empty east-facing shore, I'll wait for you to rise, and then we'll be together again, and we'll continue our conversation. But the night is so long, and I have so much I want to say to you. I tell you that you're beautiful and perfect, and how I thought I knew that, and how now I know I do. If this night ever ends, if there really is an east, you'll shine again, and I'll bask in your warm glow and watch your clouds silently drift above my calm and content waters, proud to reflect your astonishing beauty and hold it up for you to see and make you know it too.
Dave, those are pretty good, Dave. Yeah. All right, Dave Gourdoux, thank you very much. You are listening to Speaking of Our Words, and next up is Troy McDonald. Hello, Troy.
How are you doing?
Good, good. Troy, what do you got for us today?
Well, this piece came from just everything that I had been seeing on Facebook, and I was just extremely frustrated with how some people of my generation were behaving on Facebook, so I said, I'm going to write about it.
All right, well, Troy McDonald, take it away.
I've been losing my mind recently. I know, what a way to start a piece. It's unorthodox, but bear with me. But I've damn near lost my mind. Now, you need to understand that I'm a fairly private person. I'm good with people, but prefer to be by myself and with the WWE Network, formerly the WWF, Google it. So when I casually go through Facebook, it is for the reason it was intended, to check in on family and friends, in air quotes. I don't know why I care so much, or the other billion people who use it. For the past year and a half or so, the tone of Facebook has shifted from the obligatory baby and food pictures to this rancid tone. Facebook has become a place to spew ideology as much as it has been a place to connect. Could this be a byproduct of the election cycle? Who knows? For the first time in history, news is a two-way dialogue. If you had a different perspective on the news 75 years ago, you had to buy a printing press or hope you got a book published to share your view. Now everyone gets to speak, which is why Donald Trump is doing so well as a sidebar. He's an internet troll brought to life. He doesn't care. He simply doesn't care. You know how many people who have said derogatory things about women, gays, ethnic groups, and or others when no one is listening? We all would be on the front page of TMZ if people cared, and one day that will happen. We are a culture that glorifies the naked bodies of the Kardashians, yet we want some topics to be kitchen table talk in private. You can't have both. While more people than ever can participate in ways that we could never have even fathomed 30 years ago, few people can live with the consequences. If you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. Nothing bothers me more, and this is why I'm losing my mind, than to see my generation millennials complain and then delete their comments when they can't take the heat from others who share different opinions. Millennials, by the way, are those born roughly from 1980 to 2000. I'm a 1992 baby. When I see my people complain about how hard it is to get ahead and blame other people for their failures, it troubles me. In 1960, that might have been the case, but today in 2015, there are more resources than ever before. You want to learn how to code and build a website? Watch YouTube, study. You want to open a business? There are tons of classes and seminars offered to people and resources. It's not easy, but nothing is. But when things don't go our way, we get pissed. If someone hates us, we cower. If one of the big songs back in the day was Twist and Shout, today it would be Pissed and Shout. That's what millennials do. We get pissed and we shout. I'm shouting. Do you think Steve Jobs ever gave a damn what anybody thought? Hell no. He stood up and built a conglomerate. He was laser focused. He created the first iPod for himself. Don't get me wrong, there are some young people making a huge difference at a high level. They're building apps, they're making things, they're trying to change the world. By and large, most of them are doing the watch me whip and nay-nay dance. Ask your kids or grandkids, they will know exactly what that is. While you're at it, ask your kids about Hillary Clinton's email server. If you get a response back besides, "What the heck is that?" you're on the right track. That's the major difference between past generations today. Past generations stood for something, and they fought peacefully and with respect in most cases. They knew pop culture and what was going on around them. It wasn't either or. They didn't ask for a handout, they wanted a shot. Today, young people blame the police, they blame their parents, they blame everybody, and they have a platform on social media 24/7 to do just that. I'm going to share a personal story with you. I interviewed the president of the Oprah Winfrey Network, Sherry Salata, on my podcast while my family was homeless. We were staying in my mom's coworker's basement. We struggled, yet I continued through college. If I had a better start and more access to capital and money for school, would I have been better off? Sure. But I can't control my upbringing. I can only control what I do about it. A 15-year-old created Tumblr in his basement and sold it to Yahoo for millions. No excuse. We have to get up and own our lives. Of course, I am the villain, the bad guy for having these beliefs, which I am okay with. WWE Network. Google it. My wish for my generation is to finally acknowledge that we have the power. Don't wait for a turn. It will never come. Because unlike what we tend to think, the world doesn't revolve around us. We are all blips in space and time. Take it and make it. Life is temporary. What you care about today is dead news tomorrow. Remember when you were tweeting and posting on Facebook about Cecil the Tiger? You're done with that. Remember Ferguson? That's done too. Not even trending. We get pissed and feel the only way to stand up is to post, just so they know that we disagree. And after a few months, people move on. Would you care about the issues if you were the only one publicly talking about them? Standing up for what you believe in is more than just a Facebook post or a tweet. It's standing up when everyone is sitting down, afraid and not sure what to do, when people hate you, when people love you, when people move on. Who can forget the people sitting at the lunch counters in the 1960s getting beat for being black or supporting blacks and their right to eat anywhere in a restaurant? Those freedom warriors sacrificed their lives for the cause. It was about more than life. It was for the future of humanity. It wasn't about if people agreed or not, or whether people even watched. Could you even imagine a freedom warrior telling a racist restaurant patron, "Hey guys, we can't start this whole beating thing. Channel 7 isn't here yet"? It wouldn't happen. When you build great things and do the hard work when no one is looking, that is strength for this and every generation.
All right, Troy McDonald, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so next up is a piece here from regular contributor Richard Bell. Richard Bell cannot be here today, so I will read his piece called A Trip to the Doctor. The scene begins in a small doctor's waiting room in 1884 in a small town called Oxfordshire. We see several people, a suit of armor and a cow, with a few primitive electric lights giving forth illumination near the magazine rack. A mother presents with her young son and his black dog, who is coughing. Soon a middle-aged nurse wearing a tight white dress and stockings enters and announces, "Number 1965, please." The mother takes the boy by the hand and walks into the examination room, followed by the nurse, who then departs. The short, plump doctor has silvery hair, black-rimmed glasses, and is dressed in a white lab coat. "Hello there," says Dr. Watson cheerfully, "and how are we feeling today?" "Terrible rotten, I tells you dat," declares the mother. "Dis boy keeps coughing and nobody can sleep." Hums the doctor. "Let's have a look-see into that mouth of yours." The doc looks inside and comments that the boy's throat seems a bit red, so he takes out his stethoscope and does a routine exam, noting some congestion. The doctor asks, "Just out of curiosity, what school does the boy go to?" "Elementary, my dear Watson," the mother replies. He thinks a moment and observes, "Well, I could give him a bloodletting, but I think it's not too serious. Nothing a little shot won't put right, eh, Wat?" Doc whistles a tune to cheer the boy and winks at the mother. He walks slowly to his old medicine cabinet, undoes the sure lock, and takes out an enormous syringe that he fills with a clear 7% solution from a bottle of antibiotic mix on the bottom shelf. We notice that he tries to hide the huge grin that comes to his face. However, when Junior sees the long, sharp needle, his eyes become as big as saucers, and he screams, "You will never stick me with that needle, never!" Suddenly the youngster bolts from his chair and jumps into the middle of the room, looking around desperately. The doctor and mother try to catch him, but he scoots under a table. When they pull him out, he breaks their grip by spinning like a top and slapping at them. Next he tries to barricade himself in the closet, but they force the door open. After that, he shoots between their legs like a rabbit and through the examination room door. The boy passes beneath the cow, shouting, "Never!" on his way out of the office. Next thing you know, everyone is outside chasing him around the building. Even the coughing dog has joined in the pursuit. The doctor keeps trying to tell him it won't hurt much, and his mother keeps demanding that he stop and obey her. The lad has a wild gleam in his eyes as the scene degenerates from rampant disorder to sheer pandemonium. He continues to yell, "Never!" as he runs around and around, full of energy. Not even the cow can keep up. It becomes utterly exhausted. Eventually, the neighbors are summoned, and they bring a large fishing net with which they finally catch the youngster. As he is being held, struggling and protesting on the blue grass, Doc Watson administers the shot, and the boy screams like a train whistle. It was not his finest hour. The scene slowly fades into the silent distance, and we return to the present. In hindsight, we may presume that the seeds of the boy's future have been sown here this very evening. Decades later, we learn that this episode has strongly influenced the illustrious life of the man known as Winston Churchill. A different Winston Churchill, not the famous one, of course. And you are listening to Speaking of Our Words. And next up is going to be Lisa Adamowicz Kless reading a piece from Mary McDonald. I believe Mary has said this is from her C.J. Sheridan material. So, Lisa, take it away.
All right, this is an excerpt from Focus. Mark parked behind CJ's compact car, surprised they'd found 2 spaces next to each other. Parking the van was a hassle in Chicago, which was why he usually took his Jeep or public transportation when he had something important to do. It would suck if he made it to a save and then failed because he couldn't find a place to park, although more than once he double parked. The tickets had even been worth it. No way he could let someone die because of reluctance to pay a parking ticket. CJ entered ahead of Mark, and they were seated at a booth near the back. It was quiet and cool. Even though it wasn't warm outside, only high 50s, slogging through all the sand had forced Mark to shed his jacket early in the shoot. It felt good in here. After they both ordered, Mark sipped his water. He had seen the wary look in CJ's eyes when he asked him to have lunch and had an idea what it was about. The kid had been avoiding him ever since his last save. Mark didn't know if it was the shock of being fired upon or the sudden turn of events that had CJ spooked, but whatever it was, Mark wanted to help. So that was pretty cool watching the shoot. Thanks. Cool. Mark hadn't thought of the job in that way. He'd enjoyed it, but found it rather boring. Dealing with a bunch of models, keeping them all in the right frame of mind to get good quality images, wasn't his idea of cool. Sometimes he felt like he was working with a bunch of overly sensitive first graders. Individually, most of the women were nice enough, but in a group, the atmosphere could become toxic fast. He supposed that part of it was competition. Chicago had a lot of commercial modeling available, but it wasn't anything like New York, and competition for the comparatively few jobs was fierce. Sometimes he'd request a certain model who had been easy to work with and delivered great shots, only to find out that she left for the green pastures of the Big Apple. He felt like he was the manager of a AAA team, and just as his team was heading for the playoffs, all of his good players were called up to the majors. Not that Mark complained. Ever since losing it all while he was locked up, he knew he was damn lucky to have any kind of career left at all. Thinking about careers, he said, "Did you ever think of becoming a photographer?" Mark sat back as the waitress set their beers in front of them. "Thank you." "You're welcome. Your meals will be ready in a few minutes." CJ sipped his beer, then shrugged. "Not really. I'm not very artistic." "I've seen some of the shots you've taken. Some were pretty damn good." "Yeah?" He almost smiled, the corners of his mouth twitching, but it was apparent he didn't believe Mark. "Seriously. But I'm just asking out of curiosity. It's a tough field to earn a living at, and it's even harder now with digital. I'm not sure I'd recommend it to anyone, but I love it." He sipped his beer, then added, "Most of the time, anyway." "Those ladies sure seem to like their job today." Mark's ears heated. He hadn't been oblivious to the attention, but he was at least 15 years older than most of the models. "Aw, come on, CJ. You trying to get me in trouble?" Mark smiled. He knew CJ was just teasing. "It was just a little harmless flirting. I go along with it because it helps the shoot go smoothly." He shrugged. "Sure, they're beautiful, but so is Jessie, and she has something they don't." "Experience?" Mark snorted. "No, a gun." CJ grinned, "And I'll bet she's not afraid to use it." Chuckling, Mark took a long drink from his stein, then looked at CJ. "Speaking of guns..." Mark waited for CJ to respond to the leading comment, but he remained silent and reached for the dessert menu, wedged behind the ketchup bottle. He flipped through it. Mark raked a hand through his hair. "Listen, CJ, I know what happened the other night with that guy shooting at you. It was scary as hell. There's no shame in being afraid." CJ glanced up from the photo of Brownie Sundae. He met Mark's eyes for a long moment, and then he flipped to the photo of a turtle cheesecake, studying it like it was a Playboy centerfold. Reaching across the table, Mark tugged the menu from CJ's hands. "I'd go with the Brownie Sundae."
Okay, and we're gonna hold it right there because of time. But Mary, thank you for submitting the piece. All right, so Lisa, if someone wants to join the Kenosha Writers Guild, what do they need to do?
Well, we are a free group. We're open to the public, so if you're interested in joining, we just invite you to come on down and join us at a meeting and kind of see what we're all about.
We meet every third Thursday in the Hedberg Library over at Carthage College at 6:30.
Yes, exactly.
All right.
And every second Thursday, we have special workshops, guest speakers, panel discussions, that sort of thing, and those two are open and free to the public.
All right, very good. Thank you very much. If you have any questions or comments or you wish to participate on this program, please visit KenoshaWritersGuild.com and come to one of our meetings. Please visit the Facebook and YouTube pages for this show, Speaking of Our Words, and feel free to leave a comment. Thanks to Dave Cole and WGTD, Steve Brown and Nita Hunter, our engineer Troy McDonald, Lisa Adamowicz Kless and the Kenosha Writers Guild. Thank you very much to all of our guests and readers today, Tony Bowers, Irene Bilak, Jeff Sturycz, Dave Gourdoux, Troy McDonald, Rich Bell, and Mary McDonald. This is Chris DeGuire, and the world needs your stories. We will see you again. Thank you for listening.